His nation was invaded, he was kidnapped. Where he was going, he did not know. Was he going to live? Was he going to see tomorrow? The question swirled in his mind like a roaring tornado. What Daniel grew to understand as normal life was quickly becoming a far-fetched ideal in an evil and changing world. He and others from the royal family of Judah were being taken to the distant city of Babylon, where they were going to be trained for 3 days in the culture of the Babylonians in hopes that they could be of service to the king. So what would happen to Daniel, a Jewish royal in a faraway land? One of the major cultural differences in Babylon was the food. Now, we may not think of this as a big deal beyond getting your stomach used to different foods, but this was a major deal for Daniel and his fellow Jewish royals. As Jews, they followed a strict kosher diet given to them by God, and when they were served the king's food, they immediately knew that if they were to eat what was given them, they would be defiling themselves before the Lord. So Daniel took a step of courage and asked the king's chief eunuch if they could only be served vegetables to eat and water to drink. Scripture says God had granted Daniel kindness and compassion from the chief eunuch, but the eunuch was concerned about how the diet would impact their bodies. Daniel 1:9. Daniel made a deal with the eunuch to be examined 10 days from then to see if their appearance had changed. At the end of the 10 days, they looked better and healthier than the young men who were eating the king's food. So, as you can imagine, their special diet continued. Daniel 1:15. As time went on, Daniel and his fellow Jewish royals showed great knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. They stood out from all the others and were given the opportunity to serve their new king. The king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had major sleeping problems due to troublesome dreams that constantly reoccurred. Why is this relevant? Because he grew so frustrated and so indignant in his desire for an explanation as to why he was having these dreams that when his magicians and wise men couldn't give him an answer, he ordered them all to be executed. And unfortunately for Daniel, he was included in the execution decree. Because of his great wisdom and understanding, he was considered in the same group as all the magicians and mediums who served the king. The problem was, Nebuchadnezzar never asked Daniel to interpret his dreams for him. So Daniel was destined to death without even knowing why. When Daniel and the rest of his department, I guess we would say, were beginning to be swept up and taken to be executed, he asked the captain of the king's guard why the king was so upset. After hearing the situation, Daniel asked to go to the king so he could give the king the interpretation he so deeply desired. Daniel was successful. He saved the people from being executed and bought enough time to pray to God before returning to the king with the interpretation of the dream. When it comes time for him to give the interpretation, Daniel points out to the king that what is about to happen isn't Daniel's doing, but the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's doing. He is the one who is giving the interpretation. So when God gives this interpretation through Daniel, the king has an unforgettable reaction. King Nebuchadnezzar falls face down before Daniel and worshiped him. Not only that, but the king declares that Daniel's God is the God of gods. From here, the king gives Daniel a promotion and many gifts. When the king had more dreams that needed interpreted, he didn't call for the other wise men. He called for Daniel. Daniel would come before him, hear the details of the dream, and give the king the proper interpretation. When there was some mysterious handwriting that appeared on a wall, and the king's wise men couldn't give an interpretation, he called for Daniel again, and Daniel, once again, gave the king the information he needed. Daniel's influence grew even more after the death of King Nebuchadnezzar and the transition to King Darius. He was appointed as one of 3 administrators over the entire kingdom. Darius had plans for making Daniel the chief administrator over the entire realm of the kingdom because he set himself apart. Now, as you can imagine, politics can be a tough business. The other administrators and the satraps, who the administrators were over, began to work together to find a charge against Daniel to get him out of the picture. They knew that if they had any chance of tripping up Daniel, it would come in the form of his worship. Why? Because Daniel was a Jew living in a land of idol worship, in a kingdom where the king wasn't above being worshipped. The administrators and the satraps saw their opportunity. They went to the king and gave him the idea to create an edict that anyone who prays to anyone other than the king in the next 30 days would be thrown into a den of lions. King Darius agreed and signed the edict into law. When the news of this edict reached Daniel, he did what he did every day. He prayed to God while facing the direction of Jerusalem. 3 times a day, Daniel prayed. The edict didn't change Daniel's actions. He wasn't going to bow to a man when he knew the God of the universe. The group that was rising against Daniel went to his home during one of these times of prayer and caught him. They then reported what they saw to King Darius, and Daniel was subsequently thrown into a den of lions. What that group meant for Daniel's death, God used for his glory. Daniel was unharmed that night, and when King Darius, fresh off a long night of sleep, found Daniel, he listened intently to what Daniel had to say about the Lord. In response to what he had witnessed, Darius issued a new decree. I issue a decree in all of my royal dominion. People must tremble in the fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He rescues and delivers. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth, for he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Daniel 6:26 through 27. Daniel gives us a picture of what faithfulness looks like as an exile. And this is an important picture for us because as Christ followers, we are exiles where we stand. Our true home is not this place we occupy. We have a future hope. We have a different home. Jesus told us that we should expect trouble because even he experienced it. When we are at our most faithful moments in our walk with God, we can expect to experience opposition. Daniel shows us, though, that staying true to the Almighty King of Kings is possible, but we must do so with a deep faith and trust in the fact that no matter what happens in this world, we have a home we are going to once we leave here. We live in a messy world, but take heart. We can stay faithful to God in the midst of it, one foot in front of the other with eyes on Him.